Okay, guys, let's get started with this argument. I've already done a kind of lengthy, but hopefully inspirational lecture that gets your mind and disposition ready for it. Of course, what I said in the previous lecture video applies to all of class and, as far as I'm concerned, all of life. So let's go ahead and get started on the argument. So I'm going to look like a total nerd. I'm going to wear glasses with glasses. I'm upping up the nerddom a little bit, but at my age, you start to need bifocals, and these are supposed to be bifocals, but they're not quite bifocals. Okay, so I might turn towards the camera once in a while, but otherwise you can see me working as you also look at what I'm doing to the document. So I encourage you to first apply at least some of what you've learned to this on your own. So why don't you go ahead and apply the expectation that you will bracket and number anything, but only things that are statements, whether they have a logical function, merely contextual, or indicator statements. Go ahead and practice doing that, and then return to the video when you have done that. Okay, so we have, I thought you followed the Bible's 10th commandment, thou shalt not kill. Okay, so that's a statement. It's a statement about somebody's statement. Do you see that? They're making a statement about a statement that someone follows. A mistake that I could see some students making is saying there's two statements in here. In a way, yes. But you have to, again, what do I always tell you have to keep in mind when trying to make sense of something? Context. So this is a statement about a statement, so we're not going to put individual brackets. The statement is meant to what? Capture a belief. Okay, so then that would be one. If you are a Christian, then you supposedly believe that thou shalt not kill is an absolute universal law of God. So that would be statement 2. Notice that that's a conditional statement. I don't lecture at this point on conditional statements. You should always refer to your notes to know why we treat conditional statements the way that we do. All right, so then I've got, if you believe that, then you also believe you cannot make any exceptions when it comes to applying it, okay? Then we have, so you must also believe there are, in fact, no exceptions to that commandment, okay? Now, despite the fact that some killings are legally sanctioned by some states under the name of capital punishment, notice this phrase right here, now despite the fact. What is that? It's a discount indicator. And remember, eventually we eliminate not only the discount indicator, but the what? The discount itself. So I'm not even going to bracket that because I'm going to draw a line through it later. If you want to bracket it, that's fine. Just don't create two sets of brackets. You'll have to put a bracket here as your opening one, and then your ending bracket for the sentence will have to come here. But there should not be two sets of brackets in here. Okay, so let's move on. Therefore, although it may be, so we've got a conclusion indicator. Oh, look, we have another discount indicator. Although we're going to get rid of the discount indicator as well as the actual discount. It may be legally sanctioned, so I'm just not going to include that. So I've got statement 5, maintaining consistencies in your beliefs. For consistency in your belief would entail that you also believe capital punishment is wrong. Where am I going with this? What follows? What am I really aiming at? Well, those are all questions. So of course we don't bracket them. It is simply this, that is definitely a statement. If you are to remain consistent in your belief that the principle is real knowledge we must live by, you cannot turn around and try to say that Derek Chauvin should be given the death penalty. Okay, so obviously this argument is longer than any argument we have looked at, but this is the way of real life. Real life arguments that you see on social media, Facebook and whatnot, they're at least this complex. They're at least this long, if not longer and messier, if you will. So I'm actually doing you a favor. Some of you might be saying, why are you making me work so hard? Why are you challenging me with this stuff? Well, first, I honor and respect your dignity as an intelligent, rational being to further make your best current analytical meaning-making skills better. But also, this is a class that focuses on the real world. And in the real world, the arguments are much more messy, much more complex than what we looked at when we were first just trying to get the basics. So you're welcome. Okay, now let's go ahead and start labeling using all that we've learned thus far, including what we've learned about complex arguments to this. I encourage you to at least see if you can identify the conclusions. Even if you're not sure whether something's a subconclusion or final conclusion, learn what you've used, your tips, your tricks, your strategies for finding premises and conclusions, and see if you can at least identify the conclusions, and then check your answer with mine, okay? All right, so I've got, I thought you followed the Bible's commandment, thou shalt not kill. 2 seems to be drawing out an implication of 1. So it doesn't seem like 2 and 1 are functioning as a premise or a conclusion in relation to each other, okay? And then we've got, and if you believe that, so notice, so again, it seems like 3 is drawing out an implication of 2. Then we finally have what conclusion indicator word? So. So typically tells us a conclusion is coming. We know that's a complex argument. Oh my gosh, I forgot to number this. This should be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now, we know that this is a complex argument. So big tip, write it down in your warnings and tips document, or write it down here. Whenever you see the word complex argument, you should go back to the definition for complex argument, subconclusion, and final conclusion to make sure that you are applying these concepts the way that we've defined them, correctly, clearly, accurately, precisely. Okay, so then you know that this argument will have at least one what? Subconclusion. You know that this argument is going to have only one what? Final conclusion. Big tip, when I give you an argument you've never seen before, and I tell you it's complex, I'm always going to give you the final conclusion last, because it's an introductory class. I'm going to be nice. But in real life, final conclusions, or what we might call the main conclusion, can come anywhere. Remember that from the lecture. Did we put that in our lecture notes? If we did not put that in our lecture notes, you guys definitely need to add it to your lecture notes, because that is a very important point to add in there. So if we haven't added it, go back to the document on complex arguments and add, I don't have it right in front of me, and add that the final conclusion can come anywhere in a complex argument, and add that the subconclusions can come anywhere in a complex argument, okay? But the big tip, so those are all tips and warnings. Subconclusion can come anywhere in an argument, final conclusion can come anywhere in an argument. That is when we are in the ordinary argument form. When we're reformatting, that's different. When we're doing diagrams, that's different. But when it comes to the ordinary argument, the paragraph form, the subconclusion could be at the middle, the beginning, the end. The final conclusion could be at the beginning, the middle, the end. I think it might be helpful for you to think of final conclusions as main conclusions. So just because we're saying something's the final conclusion, we don't mean that it comes at the end of a paragraph. Okay, good tips and warnings. All right. So we know that this is some kind of conclusion. We know it could be the subconclusion. Let's keep going. So we're going to cross that out, because when we look at this, 2 is further developing 1, 3 is drawing out the implications of 2. We realize that 4 is being drawn on the basis of 1, 2, and 3 being teased out from one from another. So we know that that's a conclusion, and these must be premises. Cool. So we drew a line through so, our indicator. Draw a line through our discount. Now, despite the fact, okay, now draw a line through the actual discount. Very important. I hope you wrote something about that in your notes. Capital punishment, it should not be in there. Get rid of that. Remember, when you're working on your own arguments, you can do minor tweaks like that. Everyone knows that it is still killing. Okay, so we're not sure what that is, but it doesn't seem to be functioning as a conclusion. But then we see what conclusion indicator. Therefore, as I stated, this is a so we're going to draw a line through it. So we know that therefore is telling us what is coming. Some kind of conclusion. Draw a line through it. Draw a line through the discount indicator. Draw a line through the discount itself. So it seems like they're saying 6 follows from 5, meaning 5 must be functioning as a premise. Now notice this. Well, let's get back to that in a moment. Okay, so then we've got Well, questions, so we're going to draw a line through those. Of course, we didn't bracket and number them. It is simply this. That's just telling me I'm about to tell you what follows. So we crossed that out, even though we bracketed and numbered it. 8. Okay, notice this. Where am I going with all this? Going all. Doesn't it sound like, where is this all? What is this all aiming at? Toward which all other statements aim? What about this one? What follows? We know that what follows like that in a question means here comes a conclusion. Look at this. What am I aiming at? What am I really aiming at? What's my main point? What am I ultimately trying to get you to believe? Look at how the wording in this question and this question very much align with the wording, or at least to some extent, really important words in our definition for final conclusion. That's why you always want to review the definitions. It's a skill. Philosophers are very interested in being exact, especially about their definitions, at least the tradition that we are studying. There are some philosophers that I do not cover because to me they're too fuzzy and nebulous, and I resist that. I like to be exact and detailed. Okay, so if this is saying, if these two things are basically reflecting the definition for final conclusion, it's saying, here's my ultimate thing that I'm trying to get you to believe. I've already worked my way up to this with other conclusions and premises. Obviously, they mean final conclusion, which would mean that the other ones are what? Sub-conclusions. So notice, what have we done? Oh, I realize that I need to show you this. So if you need to, pause the video and catch up. Pause the video and catch up. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my Zoom. It won't let me go any smaller than this, and that's why you might have experienced a small delay in me posting these videos. Most of you will not have experienced the delay, but I am still trying to figure out. So you might notice me having to stop and realize, hey, maybe you haven't seen something. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and apply what we learned about reformatting arguments. Oh, wait, have we gotten rid of all of the excess verbiage? I do believe so. I do want to say something about the word believe, though. The word believe often functions as a hedge, but sometimes believe names a topic that is of concern in the argument. So in this argument, part of the topic is about someone's belief, a particular belief. So it's not being used to show that the speaker is uncertain about something. The word belief is pointing to something that the speaker is talking about. All right, so we would not cross out believe there. Okay, so there is some other stuff that we can cross out, though. So we don't need to have I thought because that's a hedge. So basically it's you follow. So we cross that out, right? You follow the Bible's 10 Commandments. Okay. We don't cross out anything in here. I'm going to cross out that connector word and. Everything I'm doing here, guys, is totally consistent with the notes that I told you to take. Totally consistent with the mandatory notes, but also with any warnings and tips that I gave you. All right. So, and I'm talking about all of the mandatory notes that you've taken. Okay, so, oh, look, missed some excess verbiage here. Something's expressing confidence or certainty. What is the phrase? And really, it should be what? Everyone knows. Now, can we stop there? No, we're creating a sentence fragment. That's a sentence fragment right there. We've got to get rid of the word that. And remember, you're drawing a line. Okay, so we got rid of that. Maintaining consistency in your beliefs would entail that you also believe, okay, looking for more words. Nope, that's it. Remember to not go crazy with eliminating excess verbiage or drawing a line through verbiage. All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and reformat the argument. So look at your notes to remind yourself of what all is entailed in that. So we're going to do premise 1. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and reformat it so that you don't have to wait for me to do, so you don't have to do it with me necessarily. I want you to try it on your own and then return to the video when you do that. Okay, hopefully I'm not going to stop the video. Hopefully I'm only going to pause. And we're back. Okay, so this took me quite a bit of work. Let's go ahead and compare your answer to mine. Of course, you can pause the video at any moment to make a correction. So S1 became premise 1. You follow the Bible's commandment, thou shalt not kill. So notice that this is consistent with the work that I did in here. If you are a Christian, then you believe that thou shalt not kill. I forgot my closing quotation mark. So S2 becomes premise 2 is an absolute universal moral law of God. Now, originally the thinker did not put moral, but that is what I meant to convey. And when people talk about the commandments, they think of the commandments as imperatives, things that it would be wrong not to do. And so the 10 commandments really are seen to be obligatory. And remember, that is a word that names that names possibly a moral concept. And so you have to understand that in this sense, the commandments are seen as moral rules. So I went and made that explicit for people who may not realize that by adding the word moral here. So moral law of God. If you believe that thou shalt not kill, so statement 3 became premise 3, that thou shalt not kill is an absolute universal moral law, then you also believe there are, in fact, no exceptions to that commandment. Okay, so let's talk about this just a little bit. So, for this one, I had to apply uniform language. In premise 3, or in statement 3, says, if you believe that. So, of course, we're making the logical features of the argument's reasoning extra transparent, extra super obvious. I cannot believe I'm really talking to you guys with 2 glasses. I keep forgetting I'm like that. So, of course, I applied uniform language. So to know what was meant by believe that, I had to go to the last part of this conditional, or the second part. Okay, so then sub-conclusion, right? You must also believe that there are, in fact, no exceptions to said commandment. This said that commandment, but said commandment refers back to something much more precisely. Also notice here that I said that commandment, no exceptions to that commandment. So I need to apply uniform language within here then. So I need to say said commandment, right? To maintain uniform language across these statements. Now notice that I did not repeat thou shalt not kill here because it's in the same sentence as the if part of the conditional statement. So remember the conditional part, if you have if X then Y, and Y mentions something that's already in X, then you don't have to repeat it. Now, I did miss an instance to apply uniform language. Let me stop so you can, I have to remember that because of my Zoom issues. I have to check the screen to make sure you can see everything, but here you can see what I was talking about. I was saying I had to take this. This is the result of applying context principle 3, applying uniform language to where it said, if you believe that, what was the that they were referring to? Okay, so looking at the screen, notice that I forgot. I really did. I mean, I could fake this and say that it was part of my lesson, but it's not. I just forgot. So, you must also believe that there are, in fact, no exception to said commandment. Okay, so this is not part of a conditional where we already know what the commandment is in the statement. Therefore, I shouldn't even have said here, this is a mistake. I'm going to do this. I'm not eliminating X's verbiage. I'm making a correction. So I'm crossing it out. If I were you, if I was a student, I'd draw a red line through it to call my attention to the fact that I made a mistake I don't want to repeat again. But instead of said commandment, because this is a new statement, we're making the logical features of the complex argument's reasoning, chain of reasoning explicit, I should have said what? I could have said, well, I could have left a commandment in there, but then I should have said the commandment thou shall not kill. Okay, so I had to apply uniform language there. I had to change to said or to that commandment, and I had to add the word the, so a little fix there to the syntax. All right, notice that, by the way, I thought this was so funny. I see that I'm starting to make more mistakes like this, and I don't know if it's technology's effect on my brain, but did you notice that I said tough shall not kill? It's ridiculous. Obviously, I meant to say thou. So remember, we can make tiny corrections. Of course, I didn't mean to say tough. All right, but that's what I said. That was really an oversight, intellectual humility. I make mistakes too. All right, so now let me make sure you guys can see what's on the screen. We're working our way down. Okay, so notice we started with premises as we're supposed to, and we put the premises that go with the subconclusion above that. I would not want to see that you put all of the premises first, then all in any subconclusions, and then a final conclusion. Why? Ooh, let me plug in my laptop. It is about to run out. Okay, Why? Because these three premises, okay, are working jointly to promote first this subconclusion specifically, okay? So I would not want you for this argument to do premise 1, 2, 3, 4, and then subconclusion, final conclusion. It does matter. Sometimes you do need to pay attention to which premises are supporting which subconclusion. Sometimes you go from one subconclusion directly to another. There's an implied premise. Here, again, remember 1, 2, and 3 we're supporting 4. 1, 2, and 3 we're supporting 4. So that's why in our reformat, we have premise 1, premise 2, premise 3 supporting statement 4, which is our subconclusion. Oh, something that you should write in your notes. You still don't number any conclusions, even if there is more than one. And guys, remember, if I tell you that something's a simple argument, I should only see, for a conclusion, I should only see the letter C, and I should only see that once unless it's repeated, and you want to note that. But a simple argument, it will never have a final conclusion or subconclusion. All right, so let's go back up to the lesson at hand. Okay, so we've got capital punishment is still killing. So now that they have, in this one, they're going in a very linear fashion. So they first want to try to get you to believe statement 4, or what is now the subconclusion in our reformatted argument. Now that they've done that, right? So what they did was they first argued for this as a conclusion, and then they used it as a premise. They used it as a premise by adding another statement. So this was statement 1, 2, 3, 4. So they added statement 5, which is premise 4 here. And then they used those two statements to jointly support statement 6, another conclusion, a second subconclusion. Again, we're not numbering it. Even though there's more than one subconclusion, more than one conclusion, we're not numbering it. So again, this was first a conclusion in the ordinary argument. Then it was used as a premise with statement 5 to get to statement 6, a subconclusion. So we're going to label it a subconclusion. Look at the definition for subconclusion. All right, so maintaining consistency. I went ahead and put among instead of in, because that's really what we mean by consistency and beliefs. Would entail that you also believe capital punishment is wrong. Okay, so sometimes entails that is used as a conclusion. But here they're not saying here's a conclusion that follows from some reasoning. They're saying if you have this belief, then you must also have this other belief. So it is a kind of conclusion, but not in the way that we've been talking about. It's saying something else must be true, though. All right, so then we've got that, and then you can see that we've got what? They go directly from this subconclusion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, statement 6, directly to statement what? Not 7 in the original argument. Look, we drew a line through statement 7, didn't we? Why? Because it was just a kind of contextual rhetorical transition to the final conclusion. So statement 8, so it's statements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 becomes the final conclusion. So, of course, we have the final conclusion last. You see that there is a premise at the top of this. You'll never see SC up here. I'll never see SC at the end. I should never see FC up here. Even if the ordinary argument starts with the final conclusion, that is the main conclusion, you're still not going to tell me that that you're still not going to put it at the top of the reformatted arguments. I did tell you to write that, something like that down. Okay, so let's look at what I did with the last statement. If you are to remain consistent in your belief that the commandment, thou shalt not kill, is real knowledge, we must live by, you cannot turn around and try to say, Derek Chauvin, and notice that I I applied uniform language. I don't know. I actually wrote down should be educated. I have no idea why. I didn't even know I was writing that word down until I reread my sentence. That's why it pays to reread things and to recheck things. I goofed up on some links with the videos. I thought I checked them, but I guess my brain was tired. So I'm just being intellectually humble and showing you guys that sometimes I need to remember to take a brain break as well. Sometimes I push myself too hard. Okay, so took that out. So good thing I checked that. So imagine you're reformatting an argument for an assignment. Make sure you didn't do anything weird like that. So I think my brain saw executed in the sentence, and then it just started to write educated. But that was a total disconnect between my brain and my hand. But of course, I still, even if it said executed here, I would have to say, what do they mean by execution? But actually, in the original argument, you can see that they said what? Should be given the death penalty. So death penalty is another word for capital punishment, or another phrase for capital punishment. Some people say death penalty, some people say capital punishment, but basically that just refers to the legally sanctioned killing of someone who is thought to have broken the law. Okay, all right. Now, let's go to what the uniform language employed was. So we went from saying, then Derek Chauvin, then you cannot try to turn around and say that Derek Chauvin should be given the death penalty. Nope, we're going to say administered capital punishment for uniform language. And now hopefully you can see much more clearly how the argument is working. Let's go ahead and do the pattern. Okay, so the pattern for this argument would be there's at least one premise followed by a subconclusion, which is then followed by another premise, which is then followed by another subconclusion, which is then followed by a what? A final conclusion. Let's go ahead and do the argument diagram. So the argument diagram would be, we're going to have to squeeze it in here somehow. I think I'm going to try here. So we're going to have, remember the pattern is based on the ordinary argument, but the diagram is based on statement numbers. This one doesn't have statement numbers. So we're going to say statement 1, a premise, works together with S2, another premise, works together with S3, another premise, all of them working to support S4, a subconclusion. Remember, the subconclusion is then joined together with the new premise, statement 5, right? A premise. Remember, you're not looking down here. You're not looking at the reformatted argument for this. You're looking up here at the statement numbers. So S4 and S5 then work together jointly to support another subconclusion, which was what? S6, another premise. Oh no, S6, sorry, a subconclusion. That was done with me because of course I've got the arrow downward. I got distracted right now by text, to be honest. And then they go directly from that subconclusion to what? Don't say S7 because we got rid of 7, right? Remember, we got rid of 7 right here. We have to go now to what? S8. So we go from S6, the subconclusion, to S8. There should not be any S7 in here because S7 was, we drew a line through that, we eliminated it. So this is an interesting diagram, right? So it is possible to go from a subconclusion directly to a final conclusion. There's really an implied premise in there, but we're not worried about making the argument valid or stronger. Also, you might want to put this in your tips and warnings. You might want to write that. You might want to say you can go directly from a subconclusion to a final conclusion, or you might find that in an argument. You might also find that you go directly from one subconclusion to another subconclusion, directly to another subconclusion, and then to a final conclusion. So there's all kinds of possibilities. I've just given you reference to a few. All right, so now we have only one more argument. As you can see, we're only doing 2 arguments after the initial lesson because they do take more time. So of course, I'm not going to spend 3 hours, 4 hours doing 10 examples for these kinds of analysis.